Hey everybody, it's Natalina here and I'm in my teaching kitchen. I'm just waiting for some of you to join me. I know this is kind of last minute. I just sent this out yesterday, but given the circumstances, I thought I'm cooking anyways. I'm going to share some really easy family recipes that you can prepare for your family, keeping in mind what you might have in your pantry, what kind of budget you might have as well, keeping into account all those things. Okay, so before we actually start into the recipe, let's wait. I can see people are starting to join us. But little background for those of you that for those of you that don't know me, and please forgive me, I've done many videos, but this is the first time I've ever done a live stream video. In this case, it's through Facebook. So basically, I'm Natalina Bombino Campanolo. I've been operating my Natalina's Kitchen Italian cooking school since 2011 here in Guelph, Ontario, Canada. We also conduct tours just locally, as well as to Bella Italia, which is really tugging at my heartstrings these days. But just to give you a little background about myself, I'm Italian-Canadian. I had the good fortune of living in Italy for a number of years with my family. And you know what? With all the stuff happening right now, I want you to feel like you can come in and join me in my kitchen here where we're going to cook, because you know what? Homemade food is what brings us all together. And I know most of us are self-isolating with family. Or maybe if you're not, maybe if you're by yourself, this will give you a place to come in when we're striving to cook with us, ask me questions, and then, you know, maybe provided, you know, the circumstances are good, maybe you can share some of what you make. I know that's a little bit touchy right now, depending on where you live. So the recipe I wanted to share with you today is pasta fagioli. And pasta fagioli, or my version of it, is a family version that my Calabrese family made and I grew up with. And this is the easiest dish you could ever imagine. And I love when I run into clients who have done this in a class with me. I haven't taught in a while, but I have in the past. And they tell me how often they make this dish and just how simple it is. So I thought it'd be a great place to start with a live streaming class, because it is so simple. It doesn't require a lot of ingredients. As a matter of fact, I started thinking about it. You don't even really have to have any chopping skills. So this would be a perfect recipe for a brand new cook to start with. It is suitable just naturally for vegetarians or vegans, which kind of opens it up a little bit more to a lot of people. When I was growing up, this would be our primo corso, something that we would have as a first course, and then we would have a second course with some sort of protein. So although there's no protein in this other than what's present in the beans, it is still a really nutritious dish. Okay, so I can see we've got a number of people joining us now, so I want to kind of get into the actual ingredients. And anyone that's taken a class with me knows we talk a lot about ingredients. These days, though, I'm going to give you a lot of substitutions, because I know you're not going to have a lot of these specific ingredients. But you know what? That's the thing about la cucina povera, which is what my ancestors grew up with, or the poor kitchen. It's very adaptable, and basically they just made do with whatever they had. So I think this is a perfect recipe, and I really hope you'll try it, and I hope you'll share comments with me, both on my Facebook page or even by email if you'd like, and I'd be happy to answer any questions for you, because let's face it, I'm going to have a lot of time on my hands. Okay, so here we go. Let's start. So pasta e fagioli. So pasta being pasta, fagioli being beans. Okay, is it a soup? Is it a pasta? Well, you can actually adapt it to either or, depending on the ingredients you use. And so let's talk about the ingredients. I did post them yesterday and again this morning, so hopefully you have them in front of you. This recipe is also in my cookbook, Natalina's Kitchen, Bringing Homemade Back. But again, the reason I chose it is it's simple, and I'm hoping that a lot of you have a lot of these ingredients just sitting around in your kitchen that you can prepare this dish. Okay, so first off, 1 cup of dry Romano or borlotti beans. Okay, and so I'm just going to show you. I'm not endorsing any products or anything. This was a bag of beans that I had. They're just President's Choice dry Romano beans. Okay, so last night I soaked them overnight in water. I covered them in water. water. Then this morning I poured off the water. I even noted this on Facebook as well today. Poured off the water and then I boiled them. Okay, so sorry, poured off the water and then put in some fresh water in a pot and I boiled them. And that's what I have here. So these are now rehydrated and cooked and they're ready to use in this recipe or any other recipe. So in terms of economics, really your best bet is to buy dry beans like this, okay? Less expensive. You don't need to keep them in the fridge or in the freezer. You can keep them in the cupboard. They last for a very, very long time. And you just have to rehydrate them and cook them like this. Now, I did more than what was required for this recipe because, well, number one, I've got my whole entire family home with me right now, which means myself, 4 children aged 17 to 27, and my husband. So there's 6 of us. So I'll actually be producing one batch of this for you here to follow along, but then I'll be making another batch in order to be able to feed my own family today with this. But one thing I want to tell you is any dried beans, once you soak them and boil them, now you basically have the equivalent of what you would buy ready to go in a can, okay? So if you use a lot of beans, you could do a large batch like this, then you could put it in containers or freezer bags, okay? And you could actually freeze it, or you could put it in the fridge and it'll last, I would say probably safely at least 3 or 4 days in the fridge. But if you weren't sure, the easiest thing to do would be put it into freezer bags and just freeze it, okay? So I wanted to talk a little bit about, the dry beans first. Now, the most simplest way to make this recipe, of course, is just to use a can of beans, okay? Just a run-of-the-mill can of beans. I actually don't have a can of Romano beans in the house, so I have a can of chickpeas though. So I'm thinking fairly confidently that you could substitute any type of a legume bean in this recipe and you'll still get pretty good results, okay? So if I didn't have the dry beans, I would probably still make it with the chickpeas and I think it'd be really delicious, okay? So it's all about using what you have and switch it up. I'm gonna give you kind of the basics. And then just like I do in my regular classes here in the cooking school, and then what I want you to do is just to take what you've learned and run with it, because I try not to just teach a recipe, but rather a bunch of techniques and a bunch of little skills that you can apply to your other recipes, okay? So something like substituting beans, as long as they're similar, that's going to work for you, especially in this recipe, okay? And I even had in my cupboard, I want to show you this. I even had in my cupboard this bean soup mix, and I just got it at Costco. It's got a number of varieties of beans and lentils in it, and I kind of looked at that when I was, rummaging through my pantry to see what exactly I had, that I thought, you know what, even this would work, okay? And it's the same principle. You would just follow the directions to soak the beans, boil the beans, and then you would have some rehydrated beans and lentils in this case that you could eat. And easily use, there we go. And I think this would actually produce a nice pasta or soup as well, okay? So that's the first step. So hopefully you all have some beans that you can use, or if you don't, next time you make that trip to the grocery store, hopefully you can find either dry or tinned beans, okay? So that's our first ingredient. So that is 1 cup of the rehydrated Romano beans, or a tin, which is how many? It's 28 fluid ounces is a regular size tin. This tin that I'm showing you here, this is actually, oh yeah, this is a 28 fluid ounce. So this is this size tin. So that's a pretty big tin of beans, okay? Our next ingredient is a 1/4 cup of olive oil. Now, I know not everyone may have olive oil in their house. So like most Italian recipes, when there's very few ingredients, we want to try and use the best ingredients possible. Now, I know not everyone is going to have extra virgin olive oil or maybe even olive oil in their house. So if you have it, great. It's going to really lend well to the flavor and just basically this dish, because it is an Italian dish. But if you don't have it, try and use an oil that doesn't have a distinct flavor, okay? So this is not the place for like a peanut oil or any flavored oils or anything like that. You'd be better off with a run-of-the-mill vegetable oil or grapeseed oil or any one of those oils that doesn't have a lot of flavor. Because then what we'll do is We'll give you some suggestions when we're flavoring it at the end, and maybe if you are using more of a plain oil, maybe we'll add some more herbs and spices just to kick it up a notch with some flavors, okay? So the basic recipe calls for olive oil, okay? So that's a 1/4 cup of olive oil, and then the next thing is 14 ounces of tomatoes, okay? So that could be plum tomatoes, it could be chopped tomatoes, could even be pureed tomatoes. I mean, ideally you want to use plum tomatoes. I happen to have some Marzanos. So again, in an ideal world, because there's only a few ingredients in this, we would use the best quality tomatoes we had. But you know what? That just might not be possible during this time. So I would use any type of tomatoes that you have, okay? And if that means even some overripe fresh tomatoes that are sitting on the counter, you know what? Those will work too, okay? So what you want to do is skin on or skin off as you wish. Of course, the ones in the tin don't have any skin on them, so that would be your first bet. But some people don't mind the skin. So if that's you, just chop them up, measure them out, and I'm thinking you're probably going to need a couple of cups of fresh tomatoes if you're using those. Okay. So tomatoes. Next, water. We all have water, right? So I've got a jug nearby because I can't give you the exact measurement because it depends on the pot you're using, because we just want to be able to cover everything with a little bit of water. Okay, so water, salt and pepper to taste, of course, as you wish. Pasta. We have a number of varieties of pasta you can use. I noticed last week when I was at the grocery store, a lot of the pasta shelves are really cleared out, and I know they're stocking them. So hopefully in your neck of the woods, you can get some pasta. But I don't want you to be too concerned about the shape or size or variety, because a lot of different pastas will work with this dish. And this is, again, the ingenuity of an Italian mama, okay? And I don't mean me, I mean my mama, okay? So ideally with this recipe, if you're doing it as a soup, you want something really tiny. These are called coniglietti, which are like little tiny shells. I don't know how well you can see that. Okay, any little shells this size or bigger would be perfect. Elbow macaroni, ditali, which are the little short, kind of square little tiny macaronis. Those would be perfect, and those would therefore make more of like a soup. Okay, but you could also even get into something a little bit bigger, such as farfalle, which are the butterflies. Okay, so those would really work as well. They're going to get much larger, so as they cook, they're going to be larger, but those will work. They'll still fit on a spoon, so I would still call that a soup. Okay, and then the ingenuity that I was describing of my mother was, when we were growing up, if my mom was making soup and she didn't have any short pasta, she took any long pasta she had. These are spaghetti. Okay, she took any long pasta, and all she did was get a bowl and break those up. Okay, so I'm going to show you you can do whatever size you want. I always think if it's soup, it should fit on a spoon. Okay, so you can kind of see, and that's Nonna Palma. My mom is Palma. That's her trick, okay? So that'll easily work as well. Okay, now, if you don't do gluten, then of course you can do gluten-free pasta. But you know what? This dish actually comes out really nice with rice, which is naturally gluten-free, okay? Sometimes just to switch it up, I'll use rice for my family, just as a change. And so you can use any kind of rice you have. So you could use an Uncle Ben's converted white rice. This is a long grain white rice, or you could use an arborio rice, which is the short grain, kind of starchy Italian rice that we use for risotto. Either one of those would work. But when it comes time for us to cook our pasta in today's lesson, I'm going to show you that we're actually going to cook either one of these rice if we want to do it, just like we do pasta, okay? So you're not going to follow the directions on the package and have the water all get absorbed in there. What we want is we want to cook the rice just like we cook pasta, so that we have a lot of water, and then we're going to use some of that starchy water to create our soup, okay? So a couple of tips for you there. What else? Oh, a large handful of fresh basil. Now, if you happen to have a large handful of fresh basil, I am envious of you, my friend, because I don't have any fresh basil. So you might have a little pot maybe in your window, and you could gather a few leaves, which would be great. What I do have, though, is some basil that was frozen from my garden. Okay, so when I have basil left over at the end of the season, what I do is I wash it, I air dry it, I chop it up, and I throw it in a freezer bag in the freezer, and then I can just add it from frozen. It's thawed because I took it out a little bit earlier, but to me, this is second best to fresh basil. So given the circumstances, I have this in the freezer, this is what I'm going to use. But you may not even have any fresh. You might have some of those tubes that you get from the grocery store, which would work very well as well. Or as a very last resort, you might have some dried basil, okay? I personally don't use dry basil because I find more flavor in fresh or frozen or even the tubes. But of course, given the circumstances, beggars can't be choosers. And if that's what you have, then that's what I recommend you use, okay? So that is pretty much all the ingredients, all right? So we're gonna start to make this. And I'm telling you, it is so simple, you won't believe it, all right? So for those of you that have done classes with me before, know that I love my heavy bottom pots. Heavy bottom pots are great because they have a really good heat distribution. But you know what? I might have some people watching me today that barely cook. And so you're going to use whatever pot you have, okay? So if you have a choice though, you're going to choose something with a thick bottom on it. So if it's stainless steel, you want something with a thick bottom on it like that, because that'll conduct heat better than something that's really thin. But if that's all you have, then that's what you're going to use. And it really will not make a huge difference with this recipe because we're basically going to be boiling and simmering, okay? So that shouldn't make too much difference, okay? So if you're following along with me, you can certainly, prop up your phone or your iPad, whatever, and cook along. If not, just, take a look at what I'm doing, have a peek. And then as this is the first time I'm doing a Facebook Live, I'm pretty sure it stays up on my site and we can replay it. So let's hope so. Okay. And yeah, please forgive me. I'm learning about this Facebook Live as we go, and we'll certainly make the best of it. Okay. So I've got my heavy bottom pot. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to heat this. All right, I'm going to heat it, and I'm going to add my 1/4 cup of olive oil. Okay, you guys are probably going to measure it out, but I'm going to just eyeball it. Of course, anyone that's taken a class with me knows that that's what we do here. So, okay, and then next what we're going to do is we are simply going to add our beans. So like I said, so if this was equivalent to a can of beans, it would be roughly 2 cups, which I think is about that, okay? I will show you the inside of the pot at some point, okay? Okay, and now tomatoes. Remember, if we're using canned tomatoes, we're using 1/2 can of these, okay? So what I'm gonna do though is I'm gonna eyeball 1/2 of that can. And these are plum, as you can see. There we go. And I'm just gonna hand crush those, okay? It's kind of a very rustic, I'm just gonna turn that down. Okay, this is a rustic dish, so I'm just gonna hand crush this. I don't know if you can see that. You can do it as fine or as coarse as you like. If you have any people in your household that don't like chunks of tomato, well, you could even get the immersion blender out or the blender and actually puree these. Or if you didn't have the plum tomatoes, like I said, you could use pureed tomatoes. Okay, so in that goes. Okay. Okay, and now all we're simply going to do is add enough water. Now I can turn it back up to high heat. It was just kind of on low there to start. I am only going to add enough water to kind of come to the top of that, okay? And I'm going to turn it up to high. I'm going to bring those to a boil and then down to a simmer. Let me grab actually there's one here, tea towel, to wipe my hand. Okay, I'm going to try and lift up my phone here and see if I can give you a close-up. Let's see. Can you guys see that? I think you can. Yeah, so see how the water is just barely covering the beans. You can see I'm on an induction cooktop here with the cast iron, so it's probably going to come up to a boil a lot quicker than yours will if you're working on electric and with stainless steel. Okay, let's see if I can still do that. Okay, so this is just starting to come up to a boil. So once it's up to a full boil, what I'm going to do is I'm going to let it simmer, okay? So basically, for the sauce portion, believe it or not, we're almost done, okay? This is gonna cook, and the flavors are gonna meld, the beans are gonna fully cook, and really all we're gonna finish this with is salt, pepper, and that basil for flavoring. So when I talk about simple Southern Italian food, well, this is just a very, very good example of that, okay? So it's just coming up to boil, but I want to show you when it's boiling what we want to do. And with most of my tomato-based sauces, this is the case. Once everything's in the pot, we bring it up to a boil, just let it really get going. Then we turn it down to a simmer. We're going to add the lid to the pot, let the steam escape, and just let it simmer. Okay, now there's no meat in here, so this is not going to take time, take a lot of time. On my stove here, probably 15-20 minutes tops, and even if your stove is a little bit not as hot as this, or you have a pot that doesn't conduct heat as well, it's going to be well under a half hour. This is the type of dish where you could be making the sauce to this point, get your water on to boil, and then by the time your pasta is cooked, which depending on the type of pasta you have, so the cook times on this one's 8 minutes, this one's 11 to 12, okay, so you could get this on the table pretty much like in a half hour, okay? So I've got a really rapid boil here now. You can probably hear it. I don't think I need to show you that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn it down to simmer. I'm gonna give it a little stir. Okay, and then I'm gonna put my lid on like I described to you, and I think you can see. Can you see that? Not sure, let's see. See how I got the lid? Yeah, there you go. The lid is open a little bit. We're gonna let the steam go out. Now, your stove might be different than mine. I'm on a little bit lower than a medium. I'm gonna go, like on mine, it's a 4, okay? But I'm not so concerned about the number on here as I am what's happening in the pot. So let me get it to a little simmer and I'll show you what's happening in the pot. And I think that's very, very important because we're all gonna have different stove, we're all gonna have different pots, so it's all gonna react different. So don't worry so much about the number on the stove. I have clients in here and they're like, oh, and they're writing it down on a number 5. And I'm like, well, it's gonna be different on yours, okay? We're more concerned with what's happening inside the pot. Now, because this soup or this sauce will kind of thicken up because the beans will start to fall apart. You have to be careful if the heat's too high because it can actually scorch or stick on the bottom, okay? So be very careful. If you're a new cook, that's, you know, maybe a new concept for you that you're not familiar with. So scorch is when it sticks or gets kind of like semi-burnt, and then typically even if it only sticks in one small section, all of it will smell like a burnt sauce. So you want to try and avoid that. And so we want to give it a stir every once in a while. I'm going to show you guys what we're looking at here. Okay, this is what I'm kind of looking at for a simmer. Can you guys see that? I think so. Okay, so we got little bubbles happening. I'm gonna let that go. Okay, and now we're gonna talk about our pasta. Okay, so I'm gonna let this go now. And I'm gonna grab our water here. Okay. So I already pre-boiled that water before we started, so hopefully it'll come up really quick. So we're going to talk about how to cook pasta because a lot of people don't know the basics of cooking pasta. Okay, there's a few little tips and tricks that will ensure your success in cooking pasta. And besides, we're waiting for our sauce to finish and get thicker here, and we are live, so we don't have the power of television where we can turn it off and pull it out and piece it all together with other videos. So that's what we're going to do here. Okay, so we're on high here. So first things first, you need a big pot to cook pasta or rice if you decide to do rice with this dish. Okay, so again, I've got it's about a 4-liter pot I've got there, and a 4-liter pot is usually what I recommend for 1 pound of pasta, which is your standard box, or 454 grams, depending on where you are. Okay, so that's about 1 pound or 454 grams. So a 4-liter pot, that typically is a good size for a pound of pasta, and a pound of pasta typically feeds about 4 people, okay? So just to give you an idea, that's coming up a little higher. I'm just gonna turn it down a bit, okay? And I think, yeah, there we go. So this pot, like I said, it's about a 4-liter pot. I've got it filled up, except for maybe about that much from the top. So about 1 inch from the top. We're gonna bring it up to a rapid boil. And let me think about what kind of pasta I wanna make for my family tonight. Are we feeling like soup? I'm gonna do one that's a little bit shorter. So this one's 8 minutes. The spaghetti is 10 minutes. So I think we're gonna do the little shells. That's what we're gonna do. Okay, so now on your recipe, it actually says 1 pound of pasta. So I think I want to qualify that. I think if you did a pound of this little tiny pasta, I think it would be too much. So you could almost adapt that to your taste, okay? If you're watching carbs or you're watching how much pasta you eat, then you could always adapt this recipe to have more beans than pasta in it, okay? And that's often kind of what I like to do. I enjoy the beans, so I do like to kind of add more beans. So I'm gonna add probably more like about a half a box of this pasta, and this is just a brand new box here. And if you want to do even less than that, then of course, you know, you could do that and you'll just have more beans. Okay, so I'm gonna measure it out in my bowl. Okay, so there it is, ready in my bowl. And actually, this is boiling good, so I'm going to turn it down actually a little bit more and give it a stir. Right, we're going to stir this every once in a while. It's starting to thicken up a little bit already. Like the beans are already starting to emit some starch. And that's the thing about this. This makes a really nice thick soup because of the beans, okay? So we're not too far off with that. Oh, one more thing I just thought of. If you're using canned beans, when you open the tin of beans, I typically like to rinse these, okay? Because there's a lot of salt in canned beans. So that's a personal choice. Some of that starchy liquid that is in the can of beans, that's kind of nice and it lends to the thickness of the soup. But on the other hand, you're getting all the salt, okay? So you can choose, you can maybe add a little bit of that if you want, or you can totally rinse them off and just add them in the tomatoes. If you do that, it's gonna take a little bit longer for those beans to develop that nice thick sauce because the beans will actually break down. They might actually fall apart even and be left with just skins even if you want to let it go that long so it gets really thick. So you've got a little bit of room here to personalize this as you wish, okay? So that was just something I wanted to mention about the beans. Okay, I want to show you this. Here, I'm gonna do that again. So I'm gonna see how already it's starting, it's getting browner. And this sauce will be, oh, can you guys see that? There we go. This sauce will be kind of brown, and that's from the beans. Oh, I think we blacked out for a minute. Hey, Adeline. Hey, Janet. Hi, guys. I'm not that good that I can read all these messages, but I'm starting to see a couple of them there. So that's so nice. Thanks, guys. Okay. So sauce, we're gonna let the sauce go. It's almost done. And now let's see if my water's, oh, okay, the water's coming up to a boil. So we always want to, actually, do you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna switch these pots because it'll boil quicker on this one. So bear with me. We're gonna switch just because I don't wanna lose you guys because you get bored watching me natter on here. Anyone that does a class knows that I tend to do that. I like to talk, but hopefully those of you that are, you know, on your own don't mind hearing somebody just go on and on like this. But anyways, so here, let's switch this to the front burner now, and let's put this on high. I've got actually a hybrid cooktop here, so 2 burners are induction and 2 are not. So the 2 that are not take a little bit longer for things to boil. So this is going to come up really quickly. Okay, so let's go back to our pot. So we've got our pot of water. It's actually going to be coming up very quickly. We always want to season the water with salt, and this would be the same if you're doing rice or pasta, okay? With the pot this size, much to some people's distaste, we Italians like to heavily season our water, and the reason is in order for the pasta to pick up some seasoning, we have to over-season the water, okay? So the general rule of thumb is that the water should taste like the sea, okay? So for a pot this size, I'm gonna put oh my gosh, that was Pete. Did you guys hear Pete? Janet, Pete's here. He's a couple feet from me over on the couch. I know some of you know my cat Pete. He's probably going, what are you talking about? Oh, here he comes. He's walking over. Normally, if I was teaching a class, just to be fair, I have a health inspected kitchen. The cat would not be down here, but given it's just you and I and the camera, here he is. Here's Pete. Maybe he'll come over. Maybe I'll let him say if he'll say hi. We'll see if he comes around. Anyways, back to the pot. So a heaping tablespoon of salt. The water should taste like the sea, okay? And if you're not sure, put your finger in and taste it, okay? It should be tasting like the sea because you have to over-season the water in order for the pasta to pick up a little bit. Oh, look, he's here! Pete's here! Hello! Say hello! This is Peter! I love you. Now I gotta go wash my hands. Okay, I'm gonna wash my hands. I'll be back. Sorry about that. Okay, so this is coming up to a boil. We're going to be adding our pasta very shortly. Oh, getting back to the salt. So basically, we're not going to be eating this water. Most of this water is going to go down the sink. We're going to keep a little bit of it for the soup, but most of it's going to go down the sink, so most of the salt we won't be ingesting it, so you're not going to worry about it being too salty, okay? When we season our final soup, after we've added some of this starchy water, we will taste the soup before we add any more salt, okay? So just so you know that, I don't want you to be afraid. And I hear this all the time, but from the perspective of an Italian, as soon as we take one mouthful of pasta, we can tell right off the bat whether or not you've seasoned the pasta enough, okay? I think it's kind of something that we're just used to from having pasta like our whole entire lives, okay? We can tell if it's not seasoned properly. And if you watch any of the shows on television, the competitions, they send chefs home for not seasoning the pasta water properly. It's kind of a fundamental skill, okay? So if you're really watching your salt content, you know, just, you're gonna have to trust us. There's even been studies done when they test the pasta after, very, very little of the salt is absorbed into the pasta. If you're eating prepared foods, guaranteed prepared foods, especially prepared soups, are gonna have way more salt in them. Okay, so just remember with home cooking, salt, we need salt to bring out the flavor of things, okay? I checked our soup, it's looking really good, and it's actually almost there. So I'm gonna give it a stir. In the meantime, our pasta water's boiling, so in go our little shells. And then let's give this a stir. Okay, so we're on full high heat. So when you're cooking pasta, you need lots of water, you need a large pot, and you need high heat, okay? You're gonna stir it every once in a while. Now, this particular pasta, what did I say, 8 minutes, I think? Yeah, so the recommended time on the box is 8 minutes for this one. Now, because this pasta is gonna be twice cooked, and what that means is it's going to cook here in the water, then we're going to add it to our soup, and we're going to continue to cook it in the soup pot to kind of meld the flavors. We're actually going to undercook it a little bit at this first stage, okay? So if we fully cooked this at 8 minutes and then added it and cooked it for a few more minutes, then it would really be overcooked, okay? So that's just a little tip anytime you're twice cooking a pasta, whether it's in another pot on the stove or whether it's boiled here and then it's going into the oven to cook off. You want to adapt your cooking time based on that, okay? Because it'll finish cooking in the final portion, okay? So it's going very rapidly here. I'm not checking the time because I'll just check the texture or I'll taste it. That's typically my rule of thumb. But if you need to, please set the timer, okay? So if I was doing rice, I would do exactly what I did there. I would have a really big pot, okay, of water. I would season the water just like I did for the pasta, and then I would add the rice, okay? And I would leave the lid off because we don't want it to absorb all the water, okay? And I would also undercook it slightly. So your rice cooking times are typically based on the method where it absorbs all the water, so I wouldn't go by the time on the label. I would just taste it and just turn it off when it's just slightly undercooked. I would strain it just like we do pasta, okay? And I'm going to show you how to reserve a little bit of the pasta water as well. So you would do that first, reserve a little bit of the pasta water in a heat-proof container, whether it's a measuring cup or another bowl, put it off to the side. Then we would strain the pasta or the rice, We'd add it back into our soup pot now, along with some of the liquid from this pasta. And then we would put it back on the stove, let it simmer. The pasta will finish cooking, it'll thicken up and develop some more flavor, and then we would finish it with our final seasoning. So your seasoning being salt and pepper, okay? So again, because there's salt in here, and also if you're using canned beans, we want to take that into account because there's going to be more salt in it than the dried ones that I just used. I wouldn't add any more salt until I taste it, okay? You want to trust your taste buds. You always want to taste, season, and then adjust the seasoning and taste again, okay? Trust your taste buds, they're the best tool in this case, okay? So let's give this a stir. So salt to taste after it goes back in the pot, and then if you like black pepper, you could use black pepper again to season it as you wish, a few pinches as you like. If you like a little bit of heat, you could add a little bit of chilies at the end, okay? And then of course our basil. Our basil will go in at the end as well. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about this. So if I had fresh basil here especially, I would want to add it at the very end in our soup because we love the flavor of fresh basil in any cuisine, not just Italian cuisine. But when you have fresh basil and you add it to a hot sauce or a hot soup, as soon as the fresh basil hits that hot liquid, the oils will be released from the basil, and that's where the most flavor is at that point in time. So we want that beautiful basil flavor, so we would add it in right at the end. Who else? Let me see, who's on here? Marissa's there. Hello, Marissa, you're going to make this week. Right on. Sweet. I want to see pictures, okay? So if I had fresh basil, particularly at the end, I mean, this is frozen. I am going to get some flavor out of this, not as much as from the fresh, but I will get a nice flavor. But I don't want it to simmer off. I want to get the basil flavor again. So even though it is frozen and now thawed or whatever, I'm still going to add it in at the end. If you're adding dry, it's going to go in at the end as well, at the very end, because we want that flavor out of there. You might have to add the dry, keep tasting and adjusting until you pick up a little hint. I can't give you a lot of advice on dry basil because I personally don't use it, but I mean, it's got to be better than not using anything at all, right? Okay, so I'm just going to blow on my pot here, get those bubbles and all that business down. Okay, and then let's kind of see where we're at. Looks like it's got a couple more minutes to go. Okay, so let's go back to this pot, and that one is actually pretty good. I'm going to get you in there and show it to you. So for those of you that have taken classes from me, you know that my tomato-based sauces, typically when they're ready, the oil pools on the top. So I did stir it, and so I kind of moved that around now. But tell you what, let me let it go for a minute, and then I can show those of you. Oh, actually, yeah, there is some on there a little bit. So typically, when the tomatoes cooked, what happens is the oil starts to pool on the top, and that's how you know that it's done. Like I said, when I stirred it, I kind of moved it around a bit. Tell you what, I'm going to show you where we're at for thickness, and then I'll show you when it does that again. But this is, see how it's, can you guys see that? I think so. Okay. There we go. I kind of get this little message on there that says something about I'm out of focus or something when I go to pull it in. Okay. Okay. Just while we're waiting for this pasta to finish, like I said, it just needs a couple more minutes. I want to tell you, my daughter Laura is going to get in the kitchen with me this week to help us do some recipes as well. Laura and her girlfriend Rachel, who has also worked for me as well, are putting together a kids camp this summer. So hoping that everything in the world is back to normal. They're going to be running a few weeks of a kids camp. Laura and Rachel are 17, both very, very responsible, have worked in my kitchen both doing dishes as well as assisting me with some parent and children classes Laura has. So the girls will be running the 3 weeks of the kids camp this summer, but I'll be supervising. So I won't be teaching, but I will always be present. Probably in the same room. I'll probably just set up my desk in the corner. So if you have any children that might be interested in coming down and cooking with us, we'd love to see them. We did a trial run of 2 weeks last year, and it was fantastic. We really, really enjoyed it. So I want to take a minute to tell you about that. Okay, so our pasta, our pasta's feeling, it's feeling like it's just undercooked. So those of you who are taking classes will be know all about al dente. Al dente means to the tooth when you're cooking pasta. This is actually a little harder than that even because we want it to finish in the pot. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is, I didn't grab my measuring cup, so I have a bowl here. Or actually, let me grab this bowl. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scoop out some of this pasta water. So the reason why we use this is the starch from the pasta is really lovely as a thickening agent. Okay, so I'm going to just put in, I think I'm going to put about 4 ladlefuls. Okay, and then I'm going to take it over to the sink and I'm going to strain the pasta. So, oh, can you hear Pete? He's meowing in the background. Okay, I'll be back in a second. Okay. Oh, actually, the oil's cooled a little bit. I'm going to see if I can show you that now. Can you guys see that? See the little oil, weird little shiny bits? It's hard. Let me think. Here, hang on. Let me unplug. That maybe? You guys can see that? I hope so. Anyways, we'll get it figured out. We're going to get this. Oh, somebody said hi, Pete. Okay, so this burner now, I'm going to put it up to medium. And I'm going to put my pasta in there. So the pasta's in there. A little bit left. I'm going to get rid of this pot. Okay, so pasta is now in the soup. I'm turning it up to high because I wanted to bring it up to a boil. And now, depending on how loose you want it, that's how you're going to decide how much of this pasta water you're going to put in. Okay? So I'm going to put about 1.5 ladles, okay? Because if I was using a longer pasta, I might not want it as liquidy because if the pasta size won't fit comfortably on a spoon, then it's going to be really messy to eat. So always think about that. Always think about how you're going to eat something and how it's going to perform, with the fork or spoon or in the bowl or wherever you're going to serve it. So in this case, because of the tiny little pasta I used, it's more of a soup than it is a pasta. So I want it a little bit runny, but I don't want it too thin, okay? So if it was a longer pasta, I'd want it thicker so that when I ate it with a fork, the sauce would kind of stick to the noodles and not just all slide off, okay? So this is up to a pretty rapid boil, but I'm gonna turn it down to like a medium high, okay? And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do the final seasoning. So like I said, because of the salt in the water, let me grab a tasting spoon. Okay. So it definitely needs salt. So I'm gonna add a couple of pinches of salt. And if any of my students are watching, they're gonna go, a regular pinch of salt or one of Natalina's pinches? Well, that's a Natalina's pinches. Natalina's pinches are more generous than regular, okay? So I put 2 one of my pinches is probably about a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. So I probably put in about a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. I do like black pepper in mine, so I'm gonna put 1 generous pinch of black pepper. And then I'm gonna finish it with, how much is that? Maybe that's about a tablespoon, I think, of that basil that was frozen and now is thawed. Okay, so we're gonna mix this up. And now all the flavors are gonna melt, okay? So we only want this to really sit here and melt for a couple of minutes. And then I'm gonna go in with a clean spoon and taste it now and see if it needs anything. No, I think I'm good for salt. So remember, salt brings out the flavor of things. So the first time, whenever we're in the classroom here, we like to do a little exercise whenever we're seasoning a sauce. I'll give everybody a spoon. They'll taste it before we add salt. We'll add some salt, then they'll taste it, and they should notice a brightness appear. So what happens is Salt or seasoning brings out the flavor. So you'll notice all of a sudden you'll notice the tomatoes more. In this case, oh hi Pete, and you'll notice the olive oil a little bit more. Okay, things like that. So I want you to, if you're a brand new cook, I want you to pay attention to that when you're adding seasoning. And then what will happen is you'll train your palate. Your palate will easily recognize how to season things and how to bring the best flavors out. When I first started teaching, especially when I was doing my 6-week course, I found at the end of 6 weeks, the majority of students always said one of the biggest things they learned, they were all good cooks, but one of the biggest things they learned was how to season properly, how to season each component. So we season the sauce, we season the pasta, then when they come together, we taste them and we check the seasoning, okay? So that's a very, very important skill, especially if you're a new cook, okay? And like I said, it just takes time to develop that. This is really thickened up now, and I think it's perfect. I'm going to show it to you, but I got ready today to bring everything out for the class, and I totally forgot to bring a serving bowl out. So let me just run and grab a serving bowl because I want to put this in a bowl and I want to show you the completed dish. Okay, hang on. Here we are. Make it a mess. And you can see I have a lot of beans in here, which is how I like it. And I'm going to put the camera down so you can see it. Oh, maybe not. Maybe I will have to lift it. Okay, here we're just learning. So there we go. Here, let's see if I can. I want to show you guys how thick it is. Can you guys see that? No, not very well. Do you know what? I'm going to post, I'll post a picture of the completed dish on the Facebook page as well because I want you to see. I wonder if we can go in the pot. Maybe we can go in the pot. It's hard. So maybe when Laura and I are doing the class, I'll get her to manage the camera a little bit too. So thanks for bearing with me, guys. Oh, there's Garth. Hi, Garth. Carol, hello. Yum, yum. Yes, it is yummy. So anyways, I really hope you'll try this dish. And this is probably something that I've needed to do for a long time. And I've just been so crazy busy that I haven't really made the time. But let's face it, I'm going to have some time on my hands, as a lot of you are. So come on back and see us here in the kitchen. Like I said, Laura's going to be joining me. She wants to do fresh egg noodle pasta. So I think her and I will do that one day. Especially because there has been some little bits of shortage. Like if you happen to arrive at the grocery store and there's no pasta on the shelf, we can show you some really, really easy pasta, like fresh pastas to make. We're going to do that, Laura and I. And then also too, I want to show everybody to make a really easy, no-knead focaccia, because that's kind of another staple is bread. Very inexpensive. Pasta bread, very inexpensive. Nothing like it when you have homemade. So I really, really want to share those with you. And if there's something that you'd like to learn, you know, if it's at all possible, if I can put it together for you, I will. Just send us a message. If you're not familiar with us, please check out my website, nataliinaskitchen.com. We do have our online school up and running, which is quite timely given the way it is. We have 2 free courses right now that you're welcome to join, and I'd love some feedback on those. And we also have our lowest prices ever on the online school right now, just because, I mean, we don't know how long we're going to be self-isolating. Let's hope that the world heals and we won't be here that long. Okay, but take care for now. Thank you so much for tuning in. You guys are the best. I see a lot of my regulars here. Oh, there's Kay and Laura. Thanks, guys. I really, really appreciate it, okay? Stay well, and please keep your vulnerable family and friends safe, okay? My parents, 80 and 87, that's our big job these days, is keeping them safe, okay? Cheers, okay? Ciao for now, and we'll see you in the kitchen. Bye-bye.